So good morning, everyone. We're really excited to have you all here for the GISDay Hack4Her. This year's theme we have chosen Empowered by Innovation. Happy GIS Day. I'd like to thank everyone who's participated or helped us organize this event and welcome all you to the event. And I'd like to start off with an introduction session. So first of all, I'd just like to say a few words about who Women in GIS Kenya are. So basically, we are a group of GIS enthusiasts with various diverse backgrounds from the geospatial as well as other areas like natural resources, among other policy industries. And we are designed to basically advocate for the presence of women in GIS, trying to solve gender issues, foster relationships with and partnerships with other people with like-minded mission. And we focus on mentorship, we focus on networking opportunities, research and project delivery, as well as fun things like challenges and through professional education and development. If you're part of our community, maybe you have seen some of our running projects, but if not, um, then stay tuned and join us in for like other sessions that will be coming ahead. Um, this event was co-organized by Women in GIS Kenya as well as Women in GIS Uganda. So I would like to call on Lillian Daffin to simply say a word or two about Women in GIS Uganda. Women in GIS Uganda recently actually also just began with a like-minded vision and mission as Women in GIS Kenya, being a nonprofit network that for women that is associated with the geospatial industry in Uganda. They started this year with the intention of creating a safe place for women to use technology and help advocate again to solve gender issues. Their main taglines and missions is to connect, learn, and impact, with the objective towards improving technical capacities, job and professional related challenges. So they help organize events around career activities, and they also help coordinate and improve knowledge information and building the community through basically the technical skills they have, as well as various networking events in involvement of the geospatial industry. So we figured a lot of the objectives and aims of Women in GIS Uganda are very much similar to Women in GIS Kenya. So together we decided let's create this event because we have the same mission. And yeah, so we'd like to welcome you to this particular event to learn, connect, and impact. And I hope that it will be an amazing learning session. So before we get started, I did not want to dive straight into the presentations because as we allow for other people to join in. So I have a quick game session. I hope you'll all indulge me in this. Yeah, and I hope you'll all wish to play the game because there are prizes that are up for grabs. So I'd like all of you to like take your phone or your laptop if you have one, log on to www.kahoot.it, and then you put the game pin and you put your name. This is basically a general knowledge session to test how good you are in geography, GIS, and also gender issues. So yeah, we know this is a community of members who've been following us for, I think, the past 3 years now. So you should have a few knowledge about this, and we wish that you can join us through this session because it will be so interesting. So you can join right now if you wish. I hope you can. I hope you can all see my the screen clearly. Awesome, we are at 21. Great. Okay, I'm starting the quiz now. So the first question, which is the newest country in Africa? Or basically, what's the youngest country in Africa? 10 seconds. 5, 4. Oh, there's 2 people haven't answered. Okay. So South Sudan, yay, at least most of you know that. Oh, awesome. Winner is winning. Next question. Waldo Tobler, the first law of geography states that, the first law of geography with regards to autocorrelation states that all things are related according to space. Everything is related to everything else near it. Everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related. All near things are related to each other. Wow. GISDay. We should know the first law of geography. So everything is related to everything else, but near things are more related. Ooh, nice. Okay. Next question. Which of the following countries is an unrecognized state? So the UN and other independent nations do recognize states in the world, but there are some African countries that are not recognized. Which of the following is not recognized? 2, 1. Yay! At least most people know. That's awesome. Okay. Identify which country has the flag below. So the flag below belongs to which country?
Ooh, flag.
Interesting, eh? Let's see. Whoa, that's okay. At least almost half got it right. So that's perfect. Geography is the study of, that should be pretty easy. We are all celebrating GISDay, so 8 answers are in, 10. 5 more seconds. Yeah. Oh, awesome. Okay, almost everyone. We have Tom leading. Next question. Which country in Africa has the longest coastline? Okay, now we are done with the geography questions. We're moving on. We go to gender questions.
Yay. This is kind of tough, isn't it? I feel like that.
Is it? No, it's just, maybe it's just a bit tricky, right? Why? I had a feeling most people would go for South Africa.
Yeah, me too. Where's winner?
Gender equity is related to, is it gross national product, cultural traditions, education, or all of the options? I think I've given you too long for this. Everyone has answered. Okay, moving on. Yay. The first country to have a female president. So you may recognize her face, but to which country did she reign? Or rule? I don't know.
I think it's rule, right?
Yeah.
Monarchy's reign.
Oh, that was answered quickly. Perfect. Okay. We'll be moving. We're almost done. So Africa's gender parity stands at 0.58, the gender parity index. Without drastic change, moving along the same lines we are moving, how long would it take Africa to achieve full parity? That's basically to get to 1. Gender parity is basically the equal share of resources between men and women. Okay. That was a tough one. Okay. Equal Measure 2030 commissioned a global survey carried out by Ipsos, arranged in ascending order the policy priorities. So move the boxes in the order that you think is the right priority, and once you're done, click OK. So like you can shift, for example, the green box, then the yellow, then blue, then red, and then you click OK.
Oh, that seems to be a tough one.
Policy priorities. I mean, if you're an avid member of Women in GIS, you might know what we have focused on in the past, so you might have a hint of like the most important. 20 seconds to go.
Right? Can discuss a bit on that later.
Okay. 5, 4, 3. Oh, we still have people who haven't answered.
3 more people.
So gender-based violence. As you have known, we have really focused on gender-based violence. Okay, moving on. We have 2 more questions left. Which African country has women making up 60% national legislature? So which country do we celebrate for having women take up 60% national legislature? Almost there. I'm sure everyone knows this answer. Yeah, okay, most people.
Now they know.
Okay. But which country in Africa criminalizes marital rape? So which country in Africa criminalizes marital rape? Rwanda and Kenya, Egypt and Burundi, Ethiopia and Namibia, Mozambique and Central African Republic. Almost there. Last question, and then we can move on. Perfect. I see most people have now joined the Skype, and we can start soon. So access is the same as equity, true or false? Access is the same as equity, true or false? Done. Everyone has answered. Well, okay, yeah. Most people got it right. Perfect. Okay, perfect. Thank you all so much. We now want to crown our winners. So position 3, Tom, yay. Position 2, Joy. Oh, yes. And position 1, let's Turi, yay.
Turi.
Okay, congratulations to our winners. Stay tuned to the end of the whole event. We shall announce what prize you shall get.
Okay. Turi, I'd like to see Turi.
You know me.
Oh, Angie.
I don't know if you can see me. Hi, guys.
Congratulations, Angela Muturi.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay. Now
I'll be nice throughout the rest of the session, guys. Let other people win.
Okay. So now we can move on to the next. I mean, basically, if you didn't know that those interesting facts, now you know. Actually, like with the geographic facts, I'm pretty sure most of them are easy, except for like the one for unrecognized states. Over 20 countries in Africa are not, states are not actually recognized, Somaliland being a very special case when it's completely independent and politically entirely isolated. Other quick facts is like the youngest state in Africa is South Sudan. I'm pretty sure all of us knew this. And yeah, the longest coastline is Madagascar. Quickly on gender facts. I know a lot of people do confuse access, equity, and equality. So access basically implies the fair and equitable access to services in areas essential to achieving and maintaining social, cultural, and economic well-being. But access and equity are both principles of social justice, where now equity refers to the fairness or the distribution of these resources. So in essence, access and equity are what we as women in GIS stand for, are what we kind of try to fight for in using technology and to try and bridge the gender gaps and the barriers. Now, when it comes to equality, equality is basically defined as treating everyone the same and giving equal access to the same opportunities. So it kind of differs with equity, where equity will be a proportional representation, which basically means that with equity, if you provide the same, if you provide disproportional resources, then you're able to achieve maybe the same outcome. So for example, to achieve equity, policies and procedures may result in an equal distribution of resources, as explained very easily by this picture. And then a quick fact that maybe most of you did not know, gender parity is the equal contribution of women and men in all spheres of life, so in every dimension, whether private or public. Now, the gender parity index for Africa is 0.58. And with that, it will take 140 years for us to achieve full parity if we just remain in the same line that we have been moving in. So we need to make drastic change, drastic actions. That's why groups like Women in GIS Kenya and Uganda exist, and many other amazing groups that we'll see in the presentations today to ensure that we are doing something to actually change this. Quick wins for women: first female president, Ellen Johnson Sirleaf of Liberia. Rwanda, 62% legislature. So those are some quick wins for us. And then, for everyone's knowledge, the Equal Measure 2030 commissioned a global survey by Ipsos, which advocates that the issues they think that should be prioritized for better and more accessible data to meet SDGs for girls and women. The very first priority is gender-based violence, followed by sexual reproductive health, economic empowerment, and the others. Now, if you know, for the past year, we have really focused on gender-based violence, among others, including teenage pregnancies, which falls under the first two categories. And for that, we basically really had projects, presentations, workshops around the same. We also would like to point out a quick fact about criminalizing marital rape, which, when you see from this map, it really highlights that so many countries in Africa actually do not criminalize marital rape, which is pretty sad. And I think this is where things like GIS technology and maps come into place to highlight these patterns, to actually and show the many gender concerns in today's society. So, for example, a map like this is very powerful, and that's why Women GIS exist, and the community members and the organizations that will be presenting today. And with that, we actually did have a running challenge this year on teenage pregnancies, and we had amazing outcomes from our community. So I'd like to give a shout out to some of these just before we move on. So we had Andy South from South Africa, who presented data repository on teenage pregnancy, on our recently completed teenage pregnancy challenge, created a repository to allow for easy access and to data sets. And then we also had Joy, who using Esri's software, created an ArcGIS dashboard to highlight the issues prevalent in teenage pregnancies around policy measures such as family planning and the trends over the years. And then we also had an amazing R Shiny work, which was an open source submission by Anne-Marie, which was focusing basically on highlighting the wards and the counties with the highest teenage pregnancies in Kenya and the trends over the years per county. And then we also had Moses Okumu, one very active member of our community, I might say, who focused around the policy issues of teenage pregnancies. So, for example, adoption, adolescent pregnancies, and adolescent FP uptakes in relation to the pregnancies. And then finally, we had an amazing presentation data visualization work by Kennedy Kwambai, who is our first speaker for today. So today we are honored with Kennedy Kwambai. Kennedy, thank you so much for joining us to take us through the first presentation. He is a solutions developer at Save the Children International with a vast experience in business intelligence industry, from data analysis, analytics, and mining. He is quite the talented guy when it comes to data visualization and has been an active member of our community. We are very appreciative of that. And I'm glad to have you present today on Crowdsourced Insights for addressing gender issues. Kennedy Kwambai, you may take the session. You have 15 minutes of presentations, and the audience can ask questions throughout in the chat, and at the end, then you can address some of those questions. Thank you.
Hey guys, thank you, Murage. So basically, I got into the visual challenge that was for the Womxn GIS, that's for the teenage pregnancies. And the data that they sent me, I felt like I needed to also look at, usually when I try to do some visualization, I look at who are the stakeholders and what are we trying to achieve. So I did this in Power BI, and I have experience in Power BI for the last 5 years. And this is basically what I did. So I was trying to look at the teenage pregnancies in Kenya across all the counties, and trying to look at, trying to break down in years and also in quarter. I'm sorry that I don't have the interactive version, which is in Power BI. This is actually in PowerPoint. I kind of exported it to PowerPoint. And if you look at the data here from 2016 to 2020, initially I was told that the numbers, if you compare now 2019 and 2020, there is a rise in 2020. And lucky we only have data for 2020, that was Q1 and Q2. And if you look at the screen on your bottom left, you can see that the teenage pregnancies were really rampant in 2019 and 2018. And if we got the data for 2020, I'm not sure if we have that already, then we could see that probably the numbers will go high in 2020. But this is all this is just for Nairobi. I was trying to look at Nairobi if you break them down into counties, and the interactive version will probably give you all the total from now 2016 to 2020 and down for all the other counties. It's just that this is only a static image. And there are other KPIs that I tried to look at. Now the teenage pregnancies for 10 years to 14 years and 15 to 19 years. As you can see that for 10 to 14, it is 98,000, and for teen pregnancies for 15 to 90s is 1.5. That's a bit high. And also for the family planning, you can see the family planning for 15 to 19 is higher compared to 10 to 14. It looks like probably they're hiding those kids because of course, because of their ages. And also the average pregnancy per county is 34,000, pretty high. And for the trends, I tried to look at the trend lines for all the counties, for the top 5 counties, and you can see that it was Homa Bay, Meru, Nairobi, and Nakuru. For the first trend line is, I kind of tried to pick up the cumulative numbers. And from the view here, you can see that in 2018, around 2018 Q1 had the highest number of teenage pregnancies. If you compare it with all the other years, it kind of dropped in 2017 and also 2019 Q4. It kind of dropped, and then went back to 2020, went back high. I think this is just due to Corona, and kids went back home. They need to go back to school, and maybe the stakeholders can tell us more about that. And I believe if we had more numbers now for Q3 and Q4, we could probably have a good picture of how Corona's really, really affected teenage pregnancies in Kenya. For the teenage pregnancy age band, as you can see here, the blue line, that's for the 10 to 14 years. It's kind of under 20K or under 10K. But for the 15 to 9 years, now that's from 2016 to 2020, you can see it has really, really spiked. For the 15 to 19 years, 2018, the numbers were really, really high compared to the rest of the years. Kind of in 2020, it's kind of dropping, and that's, as you believe, that's at Q1 and Q2. Now, for the family planning uptake, also, the 10 years to 14 years, the numbers are very low. But at least in 2019, the family planning uptake, guys kind of really have taken consideration for the family planning. That's for the 15 to 19 years. I also had a decomposition tree, which kind of, it's really interactive. Once you pick the county, it's going to break down the top the top sub-county and ward. In this case, I picked only 2020. As you can see, it's highlighted in blue. If this was an interactive dashboard, I could have picked 2018, then you see which sub-county or which county has the highest. In this case, 2020, Nairobi City has the highest number. And in Nairobi City, the sub-county, it's Kibra, as you can see here. And then in Kibra, the ward is Sarangombe, yeah. And it looks like if you compare this ward with these other wards, it's you can see Sarangombe is very high. This, if it could have been, yes, if this could have been an interactive, if I picked Kamukunji, then you could see all the wards that have the highest number in Kamukunji. The same thing with Kakamega, and the rest of the counties. And finally, a breakdown, kind of a general view of how the counties are doing in 2016, which was the highest county. If you look in general, that is B109. But if you look at 2016, looks like Migori was number 2. For 2017, it's Bungoma. So in this case, you can see that Migori here, Bungoma looks like number 2. It has been going Nairobi and Bungoma, and what else? Which other county? Nakuru. They have the highest teenage pregnancies. And if you go back to my initial page, the first page, you could see that from this map, sorry, you can see that the middle part, which is Nairobi, has the highest. And if you the northeastern part, the north part looks like it's very low compared to these other countries. In Mombasa here, you can see at the bottom, it's fairly high, but it's actually Nairobi, part of Rift Valley, and Nyanza and Western have the highest number of teenage pregnancies in Kenya. Yeah, that was basically what I tried to look at. And to this point, I could have done more in this, because you can break it down in quarters and see that which quarters looks like there are a lot of these cases, depending on which county you are looking at. So this is basically what I have. And if anyone needs to see the interactive dashboard so that they can kind of answer some of the dashboard can answer some of their questions, you can reach out to me. I can show you, or I can even share with you the whole dashboard, as long as you have a Power BI account. Yeah. So that's it for me. Any questions?
Numbu, do we have any questions from the chat? Maybe Moses, sorry, Kennedy, I can ask you. You said you used Power BI, right?
Yeah, that's a Microsoft product, Power BI.
Okay. Like being GISDay, what are the GIS capabilities of Power BI? Maybe you can tell us with like how do you call it? Like how easy is it to use to create maps and to be able to integrate your other charts and visualizations with maps?
In Power BI, we have several maps, and it just depends on what kind of activity or maybe task you need to do. Mm-hmm. Because let me share my screen on this. So Power BI, can you see the screen? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Power BI has several maps. Like there's a field map, there's shape maps, there's ArcGIS maps for Power BI. You need to have account for that. Mm-hmm. There's several maps for that. So depending on what you need, there's not only one map there. So if you want a very simple map, you can use a field map. If you want to even import a different map that you have created externally from Power BI, then you import it. That's something that we can do. Mm. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know it had like all those mapping capabilities.
Yeah.
I think we have a question from Justin Van Dyke. A quick question. Will the pattern remain the same? For example, high cases in Nairobi and Nakuru if you weigh by population. So I think, basically if it's relative to the population, will the pattern or the output of your analysis remain the same?
There's so many variables in this sense because we don't know what happened probably in 2018 that in 2016 happened, because okay, I can take one variable as the population that if it increases, of course the chances that the teenage pregnancies will also increase. Yes, it is relative, but we have to look at probably there are other variables that can contribute to such. For example, in 2020, the population is high, but the chances that probably the teenage pregnancies would have been even lower compared to 2019. But then there was the corona thing, and then the kids went back home. And probably if you look at those guys in their up country, they don't know what else they can be doing apart from just staying at home. You see. So if you're not in school, this is something that I think contributed to a high number in 2020. Yeah.
Yeah. Moses adds that the line graph trends downwards, is trending downwards towards 2020 because the data was downloaded earlier.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it was downloaded at the beginning of the third quarter. So the data would not necessarily be speaking for the entire year. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what I was saying. That's what I was saying, that if we had the data for till now, would have been a good way to say that actually corona affected a lot of teenagers. Yeah. Just let the data talk. Yeah.
Perhaps we would like to see how this analysis progresses towards the end of the year when we have the full breadth of the year. But it would be interesting to know how COVID has affected, and then we saw it in the news, how it has spiked or increased the level of teenage pregnancies. You have a question from Tom Joroge, and he's asking what techniques did you apply on your data?
Like, did you need to do data cleaning or wrangling?
Or any
basically
data treatments?
Okay, I usually this data, I got it in Excel format. So, and good thing with the Power BI is that you can import data from any kind of data source. I felt like taking it to a database management system like SQL Server. That's possible too, but I decided that good thing with Power BI is that once you import the data to Excel, now you can even transform the data in Power BI. There's a place where you can do that. You can model your data the way you want. You can transform the data formats, the data types, just within Power BI. Okay, so usually you have to do your data cleanup even in Power BI. You can do that so that once you are complete it, now you can load it and you can do anything later on. So this is basically some of the data that came in. So you have to kind of convert them into what you want at the end of the day. Yes.
Sophie, I think you're on mute.
Sorry about that. We can take one more question. So I think Debbie Adiola says about the data, could it be said that these are reported or recorded cases alone with the possibility of missing data? And I think that's related to also something that Karen had mentioned on that going to the visual on county and sub-county represented in Kibera as highest. Is it possible that these other facilities did not report on DHS, hence are missing data instead of low numbers. So actually, I think that Kennedy, you can speak to that, but that's true. It could be that some of these places were not reported. This is data that we received and then we sent it out to the community. So maybe Kennedy might not necessarily be the one to talk about it, but we can let him speak.
I can't attest of the accuracy of the data that I was provided to. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, so the authority of the data is lies with where we receive the data. They could possibly have missing data, which is a disclaimer, as well as the fact that there might not necessarily be enough resources for the reporting of this information. So the data we received was basically sent out to the community members to be able to just derive some insights, see what they can actually showcase using the technologies and the skills they've learned to be able to help at least have a basic understanding or general trend of it. But I think we can move on to the next presentation. Thank you, Kennedy, for that, a very wonderful presentation. Short, brief, and interesting, and we are very grateful to have you. So maybe you can stop sharing your screen. Perfect. Yeah. We can move on to the next presenter. After Kennedy, we are followed by Lenah Kitenge of Here Technologies. Lenah is a senior community and development analyst at Here Technologies, where she focuses on designing and managing the digital literacy program within sub-Saharan Africa. And she also focuses on skill building and sharing to empower students, youth, and women with their digital literacy through mapping. We are really excited to have you here today, Lenah, to talk about Here Technologies and digital mapping for equality. So Lenah, you can take the session.
Thank you so much. Let me just share my screen. I hope everyone can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Okay, thank you so much for having us. Like you mentioned, my name is Lenah Kitenge. I work for Here Technologies as a community development analyst. I am based in the Johannesburg office, and I work with the Middle East and Africa team on a community digital mapping program. But before, obviously, I get into that, I just wanted to give everyone a little bit of background and insight into Here Technologies, who we are, because I know a lot of people might not know us. We were previously known as Nokia Maps or Navtech, so you might know us in that capacity, but we are basically a location technology company, and our core is based on creating and providing location technology tools and platforms, sourcing location data to be uploaded and showcased on our mapping platform, as well as providing individuals, entrepreneurs, and developers with access to free location APIs and code to build different platforms. So some of our customers include, Facebook, Garmin, Bing, among many others, such as automotive companies. So in a lot of the in-car GPS, the maps that you see on the GPS systems, a lot of those maps are our maps, not all of course, but a lot of them are. We've been around for a very long time, so if you don't know us, it's okay, don't worry about it. It's been over 30 years. We're a very big company, global, all over the show. But like I said, I am based in the Johannesburg office, and I work within the sub-Saharan African region to develop this community digital mapping program that I will speak to in a few minutes. So so a key task that we focus on, of course, is map freshness. We have our own online map called Map Creator. So we run the digital program via that map, and we try and ensure that we continuously update our map with most recent mapping data, because we want it to be as fresh as possible and as much of a representation of the real world and the changes that are happening location-wise in the real world to be reflected onto our map. So the HERE Community Digital Mapping Program, a bit of a mouthful, but what it basically is us partnering with universities, GIS organizations, different individuals, and using those partnerships to not only get people to make edits and updates to our online map, so adding roads and places and schools and malls and hospitals and clinics and all of those details, but also through that we aim to upskill the participants who are part of this program. So once we partner with a university, for example, we will provide training and different webinars and sessions to the students, to the youth, to women in technology as well, and we impart these digital mapping skills as well as coding skills, and in addition to that, access to our location technology tools and platforms, because we do have, a slew of location technology tools that allow you to not only learn how to map, but to also create your own maps without coding knowledge. Or if you are a coder, having access to APIs that allow you to build different solutions that require location technology to be integrated within them. And also a big part of what we do is trying to transform the current academic syllabus. So being able to bring this program to geography departments or IT departments to try and change up this very rigid school system of, geography is the study of rocks and plants and the sky and all those great things. But it's also important to have that practical skill and know-how of how to, use GIS within geography or within IT and within every industry out there. Really, GIS does play a part. So it's so important for us to incorporate this digital mapping program specifically in schools within the syllabus, just so we can provide the students and youth with these sort of skills of the future that we speak to so often. And so when speaking on, digital mapping and the collection of data and so forth and so on, it's important to note that a lot of the data that is collected via, GIS organizations, it's important to remember that GIS is still a majority male-dominated industry. So with the data that's being collected, the fact that it is a male-dominated industry tends to inform the type of data that's being collected, and it tends to reflect the needs identified by men. And what happens with that is that the lived experiences of women and children and young ladies are not taken into account. So you have this inconclusive data, and you have these inconclusive maps that do not completely reflect the realities of society and may not completely reflect the needs of women, and therefore leading to an incomplete map. So some of the examples of information that I, just off the top of my head, that I could think of are things like public toilets at taxi ranks, things that may not be as important to men because, men can obviously use the bathroom wherever they want to, but as a woman, being able to use a functioning, clean toilet that obviously has a door and has that safety and security, pregnant women who might need access to toilets, women with children who need changing tables, so forth and so on, as well as water sources and taps in rural communities. In a lot of these communities, women are the ones who use the water the most, but may not necessarily either have access to it or have knowledge of the water sources, as well as things related to gender-based violence and being able to map domestic violence shelters. A lot of those types of information aren't necessarily prioritized when creating these maps and when collecting this data. And so that tends to lead to these inconclusive maps and incomplete maps that do not reflect the real life lived experiences of women within the community. And so some of the ways that we try and sort of bridge this gender divide or gender gap is through one of our programs called Girls Who Map. So it's basically a mapathon. For all those who might not know, a mapathon is a mapping marathon. So, you all sort of, previously we would all get in a room together and from 9 to 5, we would spend the day mapping different things, adding different attributes to our map, whether it's roads, whether it's places. And so now we've obviously turned virtual. Well, this year we turned it virtual, and it's an annual mapathon that puts women at the forefront of digital mapping. So we form partnerships with women-led organizations, and we not only, of course, focus on mapping, but we try and also focus on getting industry insight from these women. So whether it's women in tourism or women who are in GIS or women who are in tech, just being able to get their insight in terms of, for example, the trajectory of their careers. So how they started, how they're managing within that industry, what it takes to be part of that industry as a woman, what you need to do to be part of that industry. And so it's vital for us to be able to, for the skills and knowledge to continuously trickle down from institutions or organizations, so as to enhance the level of tech readiness, both now and future. So that's a very important thing for us. So participants are obviously tasked with mapping different things. This year, one of our focus was mapping women-owned tourism businesses in a province in South Africa. And so being able to add this sort of information that may have otherwise not been seen as a priority or might have not been as important to certain data collectors, this is something that we then prioritize, and we put that at the forefront, challenges and campaigns that are run throughout that throughout the Girls Who Map Mapathon. Sorry. And so being able to bridge this gender divide and being able to focus on putting together tools that bridge this divide, we tend to have come out with some key learnings. First of all, being the transfer of skills to women. So not just having access to the information, but improving their overall skill set. So having this practical where to find these tools, and not only knowing about them, but how to use them to transform their own lives, how to use them to add relevant information to that very map that might be missing. In addition to that, the importance of diversity versus inclusion. So the confidence to use those acquired skills and be included in the decision making with regards to those skills. So being able to go out and seek these gaps in the community or in society, and being able to get that information and to happily and confidently map it and ensure that their needs are being met and being seen on this sort of global GIS scale as well. In addition to that as well, consolidating the data that's mapped so that all of this information that's used can be used to transform, the decision making that happens at community level, that happens at municipality level, that happens, at provincial level, and how to change the overall status quo. So we change the way we view GIS and how we map, the type of data that gets incorporated into the map, and the type of data we seek and search for. And in addition to that as well, enriching the overall map, because having all of this data and information can only do good. It can only improve the livelihoods of the people and the communities and the women and the youth and the children whose data we are including and whose lives we are impacting via the inclusion of this data. And so in conclusion, it's important to I guess, to remember or to keep in mind the how vital it is to have inclusive digital mapping, either digital mapping programs or data sourcing that is inclusive, because of course we do want richer maps that accurately reflect, the needs of this community and the societies, but it's also important to contribute to filling those gaps in the community. So to contribute to the different social ills that may be faced within those communities, and having a map that of course reflects the needs of those who see the importance of different or certain data sets. In addition to that, we also view the importance of emphasizing equality and of course equity as well in data collection. So the actual information that is being sourced, where it is that we're getting from, how it is that we're using it, who is it that we are trying, whose lives it is that we are trying to impact through the collection of such data as well, and its integration onto our maps. And of course, lastly, the most important thing is the focus on upskilling women and of course including them in these decisions. So how do we ensure that we are not only sourcing the right data, but we're ensuring that women's needs are being met at the very ground level, the most ground level of GIS, being within those communities and within those different areas that we collect the data. So through our partnerships and of course the interest in women-led initiatives and solutions that are developed to combat social ills, we're obviously very much intrigued and excited to read about the awesome apps and solutions that are being created by women and young ladies, throughout Africa. And so we were very much intrigued and excited to read about a team of awesome young ladies who took part in the Microsoft Hackathon and of course won. I did meet one of the ladies through some of our outreach community work that we've done through Girls Who Map, through Community Digital Mapping Program. And these ladies of course developed this app that will no doubt be a catalyst for change with regards to violence against women and transforming the narrative about gender-based violence. So I know Naomi is coming up next, and she will of course take us through that app, the detailed award-winning solution, and take us through the importance of having such apps and being able to bridge the gender gap through technology and solutions such as this. So thank you all so much. I hope you have all learned something. If anyone has any questions, please do go ahead. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for that presentation. It was a really nice, interesting, quick presentation on hair maps and how they're bridging the digital gender divide. Maybe we can first hold off the questions until Naomi presents, because I know she was one of the amazing hackathon winners for one of hair maps hackathons. And yeah, I would like her to first present, and then we can take a few questions from the audience. So Naomi Bisimwa is basically an amazing multiple hackathon winner. She's a junior developer, sits as the chairperson for GKSS Pretoria campus. She's also the co-founder of Vividly IT and recently won the Microsoft Safe at Home Hackathon. So Naomi, welcome. I'd like to invite you to present on your hackathon topic on gender-based violence in South Africa.
Thank you so much for having me. So I'm just going to share my screen now. Is it visible?
Yes.
Awesome. Hi everyone, I'm Naomi, and today I'll be presenting the solution that we built for the Microsoft Hackathon, and we named this project She. So the problem that we were solving is that in 3 women experiencing gender-based violence in their lifetime. South Africa faces a second pandemic during COVID-19 with over 120,000 victims in the first 3 weeks of lockdown in South Africa had reported gender-based violence, and hotspots being mostly in rural and township areas. So it was kind of a struggle building something for those people. So we found out that people were not well educated about gender-based violence. A lot of people do not consider relationships abusive. As we know, in the African community, we are all, as young girls, usually are taught to just stick with what is happening in their marriages and in their relationships and so forth. Victims do not know where and who to turn to, and they're unable to leave their partners. So the solution that we came up with was a WhatsApp service chatbot, which would be on different social media platforms, including Facebook or Messenger, a USSD service, as well as a Twitter bot that would just be used for to create awareness and raise awareness. So this is just a few screenshots of the chatbot that we built. As you can see in the first 3 slides, this is just questions that are being asked to the user to help profile whether or not they're in an abusive relationship. And yeah, so these are just a few basic questions that would be asked, and as a user guesses the questions and answers the responses, they'll be notified and let know that no, you are in an abusive relationship. And so after the user is done, they can then report the case on the WhatsApp chatbot or on the chatbot. They can report the case of gender-based violence, whether they experience any violence and so forth, or they can choose to learn more about gender-based violence and the different things that come with it, such as rape, abuse, and violence, human trafficking, and just find out a list of emergency contacts they can contact. Over here we have screenshots of the Twitter bot that was used to raise awareness. So it would retweet and post certain things just to help raise awareness. As we all know, Twitter is one place where we take things very seriously and we take action as things happen. So we came across, when we came across finding the issue to help raise awareness, which we thought Twitter would be the best option to do this. So the different technologies we had used to build this was Africa's Talking, GitHub, Azure Maps, Microsoft Speech Services, Microsoft Azure Q&A Maker, Heroku, Microsoft Azure Cloud, and Microsoft Azure Bot Services. So the impact that this would be making is that it would be educating the community and vulnerable members, raising awareness, providing safety options, emergency assistance, aiding victims in safekeeping the documents and telephonic consultations. Thank you so much. I'll just be showing a demo of the USSD. Okay, I've already entered my information. So this is just the code to test out the USSD. We have this available in 4 different languages. So when we built, we put 4 different languages to cater for people who are living in rural areas, as well as we saw that those are the hotspots. Just gonna run through it. The first one would be emergency alert. So what we did is that we added a geolocation tag. So if you were to go for emergency alert, then you just go through it and help will be sent to you. So it will tell you to remain calm and that emergency rescue team will be on the way and so forth. So you don't have to put in your address, and you don't have to spend the time just thinking of an address to put in of where you are. It will immediately track your location and you'll be able to be assisted. Another thing that we noticed that we can't have one company working all this. So we looked to having different organizations just partnering up so that when you are in an emergency situation or you need help, then an organization close to you can come over and just help you out with the different things that you do need. The option for Safe House, as Lenah just said, that there's no proper data on maps to let you know what safe house you can go to if you'd like to leave your partner, if you just need somewhere safe to stay. So with this option, if you go for safe house as well, it uses geotag location, and you'll be able to get someone to come over and pick you up. Another problem we saw is that a lot of people in these rural areas were also unable to leave their partners because they didn't have the transportation or the money to do this. We do know that some abusive relationships, the partner can be dominant and cannot give you money to do certain things that you need. So with this solution that we built, we were able to have people come over and pick you up from where you are and just help you and take you to a safe home close to you. We also have leaving your abuser. So with this option of leaving your abuser, once you go through it, you will be called by an organization. So and they will give you, both of you would just come up with a solution on how to leave your abuser and how to leave the relationship safely without causing any harm to yourself. So this would be steps like what you need to do, how you need to address certain issues if you do come across them, and then you come up with a safe way to leave your abuser. And with the final one would be document storage. One issue that we do face is that a lot of women or people, when running away from a place, they struggle with documents because they didn't take specific documents that is needed. So with this one, it will just let you know what documentation you need to have with you. And once you know what documentation you need to have with you, you can take the original documents to an organization. As we know, organizations do open files for people. So once your file is open, you can take the original documents to the organization. They'll make copies for you. And you can take those copies for certification. You stay with the copies and the originals are with the organization. That way, as soon as you've left your partner and you want to rebuild afterwards, you are able to do so because you know that you have all the necessary documentation needed for it. So this is available in 4 different languages. All of them are functional, and we just have to finish the build and have everything ready to run. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Naomi. That's a really amazing presentation, and thank you for your work and service to our women out there. I'd like to give this opportunity for very few, 1 or 2 questions from the audience for either Naomi or for Lenah on the innovations they are using for this. So, okay, we have a question from Celina. What are the future plans for the app? Will any organizations use it?
Definitely. I mean, we're not looking to have just one organization use it. We definitely want to have multiple organizations use it. That way, it can be accessible to anyone and it's not restricted to people. If we were to have one organization use it, for example, and be not based in a specific area, then I'd say that we're restricting some people from using it. So we're looking to have multiple organizations use it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have another question. What treatments do you have you considered in terms of data security for your app?
Okay, so with the Microsoft Azure challenge, one of the challenges was to use their technologies, and with using their technologies, this data is kept safe. And with using Heroku and so forth, they do have security services. Just by using their services, your data will be secure through Heroku and through Microsoft.
Perfect.
Awesome. Now, do we have any other question, or we can?
No.
Okay, if we don't have any other questions, you can ask at the end of the session if something comes up to both Naomi and Lenah. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And last but not least, we have the icing on the cake with the very last presentation. We have Celina Lee. Celina is the co-founder and CEO of Zindi, with a passion for unleashing power of data for social good. Celina is a thought leader and focuses on the intersection between data and development, where she has played key roles in the launches of various global platforms, including Alliance for Financial Inclusion, as well as Insights to Impact, and now Zindi. She seeks to bridge the gap between private and public sectors across various development areas. And with that, we have 2 very impactful presentations today, where she's going to present on challenges. One on the challenges that we're running in Zindi. One is on Womxn in big data, so around female-head households, and the other is on Mtoto News Childline Kenya Call Volume Prediction Challenge. So Celina, thank you very much for having us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's really a pleasure to be here. Can I share my screen?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Thanks. Yeah, it's really amazing to be here and hear about all of the great work that you guys are doing. As was said, my name is Celina, and I am one of the co-founders, and I'm the CEO of Zindi. Zindi is a data science competition. I'm dialing in from Cape Town, South Africa, and Zindi is a data science competition platform focused on the African market. We like to think that we have African roots, but global reach. And we're really driven by the belief that AI and data science need to be for and serve everyone. But recently, in the last few months, we've been digging into our own data, and the problem that we realized is only 23% of our own users are women. So this takes us, so we started looking around and realized that while AI and data science have this promise as one of the fastest growing fields in the world today, still only 26% in the world are women, and I think that might be even an overestimate, and 12% of machine learning researchers are women. So this begs the question. We know that at a global level, the world's leaders have committed to creating 470 million new jobs by the year 2030. But what we are concerned about is how do we ensure that these advances and these new opportunities are shared equally among everyone? So there is a lot to do. And time is running out. So 2 years ago, we started Zindi, my co-founders and I. Zindi is a data science competition platform, as I said, focused uniquely on the African market. We've convened a community of over 20,000 data scientists that are using AI and machine learning and data science to solve some of the world's most pressing problems. Companies and organizations and governments can come to Zindi to source the best talent and the best solutions for their specific organizations and their needs. And data scientists are able to come to us to hone their skills on real life problems, real world data sets, to build up their own professional portfolio of projects that they've solved. And third, to connect with each other and connect with organizations and companies that are looking for people like them. So I wanted to start with a few examples of what these competitions are. What does it mean when we run a competition? So one of the early competitions that we ran of just over a year ago was with Childline Kenya, and maybe some of you are familiar with them. It's estimated that about 150,000 children are physically or sexually abused every year in Kenya. And when we spoke with the executive director of Childline Kenya, what she explained to us is that as an organization, as a call center, they field hundreds of thousands of calls every year, and they are extremely under-resourced. Just finding the staff and figuring out when the staff should be there at the call center ready to take calls is one of her biggest questions and pain points as an executive director. So we ran a challenge for them, taking some of their historic call data and challenged our community of data scientists to build basically forecasting models using machine learning to predict every day, every hour, how many calls would Childline Kenya receive. So just to give a picture of what the data looked like, on the top graph, you see this is what the hourly call volumes look like. You can see it's very sporadic, changes hour to hour and day to day. And even there's a bit of seasonality in it. So the blue part of the chart shows you what data was provided to our data scientists on Zindi to train their models on, and the orange is the last slice of a few months that they had to then estimate every hour, every single day, how many calls Childline Kenya would receive. And you can see on the bottom graph a more detailed look at the trends hour to hour and how the predicted values, which is the orange line, followed the trends of the actual values, which is the blue line. So this was quite nice. And what was also really exciting about the results of this challenge is that the winner of this challenge was a fourth-year mathematics student in Nairobi, Lawrence, and he won the challenge. And what's amazing is that currently right now he is interning with the organization. And so it's really about getting the best solutions into the hands of organizations like Childline Kenya so they can optimize the resources that they have and have an even greater impact on the country. And it's also about creating space for talent, like Lawrence, to also use his talents to have an impact on his community. A second example of a challenge that we ran also about a year ago was with the Women in Big Data South Africa chapter. This is a nonprofit organization in South Africa that gathers a community of women data scientists and data enthusiasts from across South Africa. And we ran a challenge with them in partnership as well with Microsoft to use the South African census data to predict the level of women-headed householdship in each ward in South Africa. So in South Africa, women-headed householdship is on the rise over the last number of years. And we know from just understanding of the development issues around women-headed householdships, often they are the most vulnerable households. They tend to have lower income than than non-women-headed households, and they also are most vulnerable to poverty. So we ran a challenge using the South African census data. We broke up the country into 4,000 wards. And for each of the wards, we measured the percentage of the households that are headed by women and also living below the poverty line. So to give you a sense of what this looks like, this is the map of South Africa and the 4,000 or so wards in the country. What our idea was that the census is taken only every 10 years. And this is something that I'm really excited about and passionate about because I've worked quite a bit with survey data. Surveys can be very expensive. Of course, censuses are extremely expensive and can be done only once every decade. The last census Africa was practically 10 years ago, 2011. The census is one way to ground truth and measure very accurately the level of development or the issues that specific households are facing in the country. But for a policymaker, for the government, for development actors, it's also important for them to be able to monitor these types of indicators in between the 10 years that the census is taken. They need to have a constant feedback loop to know how their policies and their programs and interventions are doing, and where are the problem areas and where should they be targeting their resources. So in order to do this, one of the questions that we had is, could we use GIS data? This was also in partnership with Here Technologies. And can we develop models that use data sets that are publicly available, that are from a supply side constantly monitored, and then develop models that can measure, that can predict or estimate the level of women-headed households in each ward. So you can see some of the examples of the variables that we provided, including the type of dwelling, is there a car, is there a satellite TV, enrollment in school. So these are all indicators that should be collected on an annual basis, if not more frequently. And can we build then models to predict the number of women-headed households in each ward? So this was a challenge that we ran. What was amazing is that this was actually our first women-only competition on Zindi. The winners came from Kenya, Nigeria, Tunisia, and actually just in terms of turnout for women, I think we had about 300 women entered this competition. And even for Zindi, this was an opportunity to change the demographics of our platform. We actually saw, after running a competition that focused on this type of problem, that earmarked or saved a space for the women on the platform, we actually saw more female participation on all of our leaderboards, on all of our competitions. I wanted to add just one last example of a competition that we're running, being that this is a GIS community, and this is a competition that is ongoing, that's still open right now and on our platform. We've launched recently a challenge in partnership with Uber, the World Bank, and Flare, which is kind of like an Uber for ambulances in Kenya. Some of you might be familiar with it. It is estimated, or it is understood, that roadside accidents are actually the leading killer of children worldwide, not just in Kenya, but worldwide. And one of the things that we understand from talking to people in this space is that the time between the accident occurring to the time that the first responders or the ambulances arrive on the scene is the most critical window. And it's the window that you want to minimize as much as possible. Basically, the time from the accident to the time that the first responders are there to help the people in the accident. So what we wanted to tackle was Flare as an Uber for ambulances. Where should they be locating their ambulances day to day, hour to hour in Nairobi? And understanding that the traffic patterns and the day-to-day, hour-to-hour variances in traffic patterns in Nairobi can be somewhat perceptible. Can we use machine learning and big data to to help guide FLAIR in understanding where they should locate their ambulances during the days. So we took a data set from the World Bank, which has characteristics of the different streets, the different intersections. They also had a data set of all the historic roadside accidents that occurred in Nairobi for a number of years. We also combined this with weather data that is publicly available. We also combined this with Uber, which was able to provide historic traffic patterns and speed data. That's for each road segment, how quickly is the traffic moving? And this is all collected through their Uber drivers. So this is the challenge now, is taking all of these different informations about Nairobi and traffic patterns and the history of accidents that occurred on the roads and where in Nairobi. Where should FLAIR locate each of their ambulances every hour, every day, to minimize the distance that the ambulance has to travel to arrive on the scene? So this is a competition that is actually still open, and I would invite all of you to check it out and apply your amazing skills to really, at the end of the day, save lives. So in conclusion, over the last 2 years of Zindi, we've managed to hit a number of really exciting milestones. Even some of these numbers should be updated. We're at over 20,000 data scientists. We're at 23% female. We've run over 60 competitions and awarded over $175,000 US to data scientists for solving real problems. And these have all been really exciting milestones, but the most important thing to me, perspective, is that advancing data science, advancing the applications of big data to solve problems in Africa, the benefits are really twofold. The first is, of course, that for organizations, for companies, for governments to use data, it means that you can extend services more efficiently. You can take your resources even further. For companies, it means being globally competitive. Those are all very important things, but even more important, I think, is the second benefit, which is developing this space means building a pool of talent that is upskilled, not just for a job today, but for a career, a long-term career in a globally competitive field like data science, which means really long-term and sustained development for the continent. Let me just pause there. So in conclusion, we at Zindi, we are committed and we are driven by the belief that AI and data science needs to be for and needs to serve everyone, everyday people. And we believe that we're only going to be able to do this through partnerships. And that's why, this connection with women in GIS is so important. And we're really excited to see where we can take this partnership in the future. So I would invite all of you, if you're interested in joining a competition, for example, the ambulance in Nairobi competition, if you're interested in meeting the rest of the community, or picking up new skills. I know that you all specialize in GIS, but how, are you interested in leveraging more machine learning in your GIS, or even exploring other areas of data science? I would really encourage all of you to check out Zindi. We're at zindi.africa, and please reach out if you have any questions or any ideas. You can reach us at zindi.africa. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Celina Lee. That was an amazing presentation. Yeah, we really love the work that you're doing, the competitions, and how it's helping improve our society and how it's bringing change. Maybe we can take one question from the audience, where I've seen Tom has asked, how is the scoring of Zindi done? So I think he would want to be part of the Uber Nairobi Ambulance Challenge. He wants to know how he can get ahead.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. The way that we score is completely objective, and it is done on our platform on the back end. What we do is, for any data set, so I'll give you the Nairobi ambulance challenge, for example. For every data set that we have, we split the data between a training set and a test set. So for example, in Nairobi, we have a few years of accident data, of historic accident data, the GPS, the actual location of the accident, the time of day of the accident, the date. We split that between a training set so that you would have that data, you would know when the accidents happen and what you should be, training on. The last bit of the data, which is, I can't remember now, but maybe a few months or maybe a year, that is on our back end. So that we know is the truth. You don't know about the truth. So once you build your model, you then apply your model to the future set of data, which is the test set of data. And on the back end, we're able then to score your solutions about based on how close you got to the actual truth. For the ambulance challenge, it's very simple. You tell us where your ambulance should be located, and we calculate the distance between the accident and your ambulance, where the accident actually happens, and whoever gets the least number of kilometers wins.
Awesome. Numbu, are there any other questions from the audience, or we can now proceed to the last part of the session?
Yeah, we can take one more question. Someone was asking, is Zindi open source? And for new beginners, I'm just going to bundle this two into one question. For new beginners, how can I get started on Zindi, and what techniques or processes have you put in place for people who are not aware on how to build models, and how do we expand that to newcomers? Because I think on the platform, someone was telling me privately, it's very intimidating. You have to kind of be a data scientist before you get in. So how do we open that to newcomers?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question. I completely appreciate that. And we are aware that the vast majority of our users are beginners. And so we are trying to put in more resources in place and watch this space in the next few months. We do have a goal, we are trying to launch new features that will support beginners even more. But at the moment, we have the list of competitions. Even if they're closed, you can still enter, actually. You can't get on the leaderboard, but you can download the data. You can still build your models and get a score. You can still practice on it. So I think, the vast majority of people who are on Zindi are there to learn, there to just experiment and play with data and get used to data science concepts. We have so that's the first thing. All the competitions are open. You can try your hand at any of them. Some of them that are named knowledge competitions have starter notebooks and some tutorials linked to them. So check out the knowledge competitions. And so that's second. And then third, I also want to point out that we have a filter on the top of our competitions. There's a good for beginners filter. So if you check that out, that's something new that we introduced that gives you the list of entry-level competitions that we would recommend.
Okay, perhaps let me bounce off that question from that user. Do you open source some of the solutions on past competitions for other beginners to review? That's my personal question, bouncing off of the.
That's a good point. We realize that we need to make it more accessible. If you do a search on GitHub, it's crazy. You'll find, hundreds of solutions for Zindi competitions. If you just search Zindi on GitHub, on the discussion forums for each of the competitions, a lot of times people post their solutions that are linked to open source GitHub solutions. So that's something to look for in the discussion forum. But I take the feedback, because actually that's something that we're thinking about, is reviewing some of those solutions and then posting it more officially within the competition so people can access them quickly. But yeah, I thank you for that question.
Okay, so thank you so much, Lenah, for that question. We have another question, the very last one, Jerry, and then you can allow us to. So Celina, do you delve into policy about big data and machine learning? Are you concerned with policy implementation as governments view this field as relatively new? It's a mouthful. So it's about.
Yeah, I think that's great. as a company, we haven't necessarily done a lot, but as it happens, just yesterday, I was on a UN forum about data governance, the safeguards that are needed, and that obviously had a government audience. And I mean, I'm really excited whenever we're invited to those discussions, because I think that we bring a very practical and a very practical experience with what these policies can mean for unlocking new solutions and innovations. So it's something that's very important to me personally. But as a company, we haven't necessarily been, it's not part of our business, but it's something that we find very important, and we want to be parts of these conversations for sure.
Thank you guys so much for your questions. Jerry?
For sure. Thank you so much, Celina. As Celina has said, it's all about trying it out, putting it out there, and you can try with beginner. You can try not just data science, but spatial data science, because we are GISs. So you can have your spatial data science solutions in there. And yeah, just learn at least in the beginning, if not submit a solution. Thank you, Celina, for that presentation. Now we are going to move to the final session of today's event, the much awaited panel discussion session, where I am going to call upon our very own Caroline Otiwa, who is our advocate for women in GIS Kenya, to run through this session. Caroline, you may take it away.
Thank you very much, Jerry. Thank you guys for actually being with us till now. I think before I go on, I'd like to invite Alkags, Karen, and Kenneth to turn on their mic. As the next, going to be a discussion around availability of digital solutions and how usable they are in trying to solve gender gaps. So in this discussion, I'm going to be joined by Alkags, hi Alkags, Dr. Kenneth Kwambai, and also Karen Bett. So Alkags is a leader at the Open Institute, where they focus on promoting responsive and open governments and active citizens. So he plays a he plays a role that is in strategic management, both internal and external communication, and is actively promoting the vision of openness and openness of data globally for the organization.
Hi, thank you very much for having me.
Hi. I don't see Kenneth and Karen, or I see Karen. We're also joined by Karen Bett. Karen Bett is a policy officer for the Global Partnerships for Sustainable Development data. She conducts research and policy analysis on data for development, and also supports the Leave No One Behind agenda. She's also responsible for working around citizen-generated data and supports the task team for that. Welcome, Karen. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Happy to be here, Carol.
And finally, we are joined by Dr. Kenneth Kwambai, who's the user engagement manager at Digital Earth Africa. He plays a key role in the transition of the Africa Regional Data Cube to Digital Earth Africa, inclusive of both technical support and user engagement. He's also responsible to drive the usage of Digital Earth Africa data and services, and also engage the wide network of partners that they have across Africa. Welcome, Kenneth.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here. Thank you.
Amazing. So I guess to start off conversation, I'd like to hear from all the three panelists your thoughts on what you think about whether digital solutions are the answer to reducing gender gaps. And gender gaps here, in this case, we're talking about probably access or not being able to access facilities and services for both men, women, and the other gender. Yeah, so probably we can start off with Alkags.
Okay, thank you very much for having me again. I'm really happy to be here. And the thing that excites me the most is that I think women tend to suffer the brunt of the negative effects of most development matrices. If you think about lack of water, it's women who have to go the furthest to get water for their families. If you think about health, it is women who have to go the furthest to get healthcare. If you think about housing, domestic work, access to democratic processes like voting and so on, in almost every sphere of the developmental matrices, women are the ones who suffer the most. For me, that there's an effort like the Women in GIS in Kenya, in Uganda, and I think globally, for me says that we've taken a very big step to solve a lot of these problems for society. Now, to your question, I think digital solutions go very far in solving society's problems through women and for women. Even away from GIS, when you think about things like mobile phones and mobile money, they've had a very big impact in terms of ensuring financial inclusion, not just for women, but for families and for society in general. So there's a massive opportunity, in my view, for women. And I single out young women, especially, to use technology to create access to solutions that plague us, especially at policy level. So, I guess the short answer to your question is primarily yes, but no, in the sense that data alone doesn't solve the problem. It has to go beyond the data. It has to go to that we have collected the data, that the women, that the citizens understand what that data is saying, and that there's then advocacy and there's a push for the right kind of solutions that help solve those problems. So data without action is useless. So it has to go from data to stories to action as quickly as possible. And the faster the turnaround that we get from through that continuum, the better it is for everyone.
Amazing. Those are good insights, and you've introduced the aspect of it. It has to go from data to stories and to finally implementation or action. So both Kenneth and Karen are in the field of actually trying to implement this data, collecting this data and trying to implement this data. I'd also like to hear your thoughts on that, like how impactful, or how has the availability and access of data actually been able to try and get us to solve the gender gap.
I can go next, Caroline. Just to share the sentiments that Al has mentioned. When you think about digital solutions and you're thinking about gender solutions or gender gaps, you're sort of now slashing that digital divide, and then there's a gender divide. And initiatives like Women in GIS Kenya, Women in GIS Uganda, and also the presentations that have been made really show that there's a lot we can do and there's a lot ongoing. But I think the stat that Zindi shared, I think it was about 20% of data scientists are women. If that's a global figure, you can imagine how small that might be in Africa. And for me, I see that it puts even more pressure on us who are trying to close the gender gap, close the digital divide, to use that existing skill to propel us to reach a bigger number, to reach a wider population with solutions. I think, from my experience, solutions exist, there are many, but that closing the loop, as Al mentioned. So from the solution to the answer, and making decisions and actually changing lives. So when you start seeing lives are changing, that's when you know that you've actually made a difference. So I think we can do more in trying to make sure that the solutions that we have are reaching the right people, that are answering the right questions or solving the right problems, and they're in the hands of people who are making decisions and they're making the right decisions. And I think for me that's really where the rubber meets the road, where it's more challenging, it needs more collaboration, more partnership, more coordination. So yeah, it just long story short, I think there's a lot more work that is expected of us, being a smaller population of data scientists, young women, thinking about this. So the onus is really on us to think about what solutions can we do to bring those who are left out on board, to bring them on board. Back to you, Carol.
Amazing. So just before Kenneth speaks on this. I'd also like you, Kennedy, to introduce the aspect of, so now we've gotten to implementation. We're no longer talking about the lack of solutions or lack of innovative ideas or tools or systems that are being developed. Now we are on to the actual implementation. I think, in my opinion, the biggest challenge in implementation is probably not having policies around these policies that directly support the implementation of solutions that are being developed by data scientists or by different computer scientists. I'd like for you to speak on this, Mubea.
Thank you very much, Carol. Happy to be here. Digital solutions actually are the key. I'm looking in terms of our end where we have inclusive governance in decision making, where we have a percentage, at least 50% of our team based everywhere. Then also we are looking at the products that you're developing, who are the beneficiaries of the data and services. So we are currently working on a gender strategy, which is a gender equity, diversity and social inclusion, so that we reach out everyone in terms of our capacity building, as well as our outreach activities. Also, the other part is raising awareness so that we can influence the policy at the local level, national, global, and maybe then if I try to answer your question, I would like to share a small photo. I think some of us think visually, if you may.
Yeah.
So it's about a small journey that we made somewhere, and I was so intrigued by the people I met, and this technology is also playing on us like right now. Here it goes. So it's about an area I visited, and I was intrigued to see that the people, we are talking about gender, but we are not talking about the whole aspect of reaching out to everybody. And if you look at this photo, you can see we are at a remote location just next between Marsabit and Turkana. It's called North Hor. And we are looking at how we can communicate this technology to these people at this level. And in this particular group, there are more women involved in the community activities. And you can see these are the guys who are actually the backbone of this economy locally. So if our solutions, I'm looking at the end game, how we can improve their lives, then we'll help the whole community and educate the whole village, just as to answer your point. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I'm glad that you've showed us that picture and introduced the aspect of ultimately and in implementation. There's a lot of women that are involved in the development of solutions, and then second, the uptake and the use of these solutions. And so in this probably, and in regard to this, I'd probably like to hear from Al, since you seem to have a lot of experience in the implementation of solutions, probably regionally in Africa, as well as globally. So when we start with comparison of since we started talking about gender equity, gender equality, what different nations are doing, how the uptake is different in different nations, and how leadership comes into play. How has that been a challenge for you, or maybe or maybe you haven't experienced this as a challenge? You can probably talk to us in this regard, how policy comes into place and how leadership affects the implementation of the solutions that are being developed.
Yeah. Well, in my experience, I think probably the biggest thing to note is that, number one, policy and implementation go hand in hand.
Yeah.
I argue that for the most part, access and the use of digital solutions are the gap that currently exists. That's where the opportunity is for us to sort of solve the problem. A lot of government institutions, a lot of state utilities are not using data per se to formulate policy. A lot of them are using either anecdotal data, or they're using estimates. They get a researcher who goes interviews a sample size of people, and then they sort of estimate what that might look like, overall. If you look at many countries on the continent and you look at things like their national economic surveys, you look at their commodity surveys and so on and so forth, all of those are based on very small sample sizes that then I use to extrapolate what that might mean. Technology then has allowed for data is the biggest gap that currently exists. So, and I think that the biggest task for us, therefore, is to figure out how to disseminate the number of people, or to increase the number of people who actually collect and use GIS data, and make GIS to not be such an expert-driven tool. I mean, I can see girls walking around with a mobile phone or with a gamin to map out their community's water points, for example. I can see women, using a gamin to map out the routes that they take to go to their nearest health center for maternity health care and that sort of thing. These are all things that currently exist and that are low adoption, low tech things that are going to be extremely. You guys who are the experts in GIS would then take that data and help it make sense for policymakers and for others. Just the collection of data. Of course, the availability of technology is there, but I think from what I have learned, many of the phones that have WhatsApp are also able to do something with GIS. So even if communities are contributing small bits of data at any given time, there's a real opportunity for us to explode the amount of geo data that currently exists.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think at the moment the GIS industry or sector has really quite developed compared to where we are now, compared to about 30 or so years ago. I think now it has come as it's second to nature. So when anyone is talking about data collection, we have to talk about is your data geocoded? Like, are you actually collecting locational data? And probably Karen has a lot of experience on this. I'd like to hear from you about ways in which you think location data or maps have been very useful in trying to capture the inequalities or trying to capture ways in which there's gender discriminatory practices. So in this case, you can speak to both discriminatory practices for against women or against men or against the other gender.
Thanks, Caroline. I'll give two examples and then I'll give one suggestion. Looking at the balance. So I know in Tanzania there's been I don't know if there's Women in GIS Tanzania, but there's been a couple of organizations that do OpenStreet mapping, and they've been working with women at subnational level to, document or even report cases on FGM. And I know that has been really successful in informing policy and also just curbing the issue, because it's the girls who are reporting, it's the women who are reporting the issues. And with that, they've been able to actually map out locations that have high prevalence of FGM and locations where, they're taking action. So that for me, I found it quite profound. I'm happy to share a little bit more about them or link you up. But, that has been like real case examples where they're solving real problems. I know, FGM could also be something that would be relevant to a context like Kenya, with COVID restrictions now, more girls, and especially where I come from, are, undergoing FGM. The numbers are going up right now, and I think that's something that the young girls can actually, help us track. The other one I would say is on gender-based violence, and I think this is something we've been cooking with Women in GIS. How do you support government in Kenya to think about gender-based violence and think about bringing it together. So it's not just looking at location data or GIS data, but other data sources that are allowing us to bring together and form an aggregation on gender-based violence data. Right now, how government collects that information is there's another NGO which collects it, and it takes a whole week for government to access that information. And when they do get the reports, it's in PDF, so it's not even machine readable. And it even makes decision making slower. So you can imagine if we had more innovative solutions, more innovative ideas, and solutions to make the data available faster, in a way that government can make it, can use it better, but also bringing in together different sources. So whether it's the SMS or helpline reporting, whether it's data from police reporting or police reports, whether it's data from the health facility, whether it's data within the community using the community leaders or community health workers, and also from the citizens themselves. So how do you aggregate that data and actually, give a real clear picture on gender-based violence? So again, not relying on a survey that happens every 5 years to make estimates and to make predictions. The last one, and as I said, this is more of a solution really, or a suggestion, is when you think about gender and thinking about the gender differentials. So how are men and women excluded or left out when it comes to solutions? What are the things that women and girls in rural areas struggle with, or what don't they have access to? It could be things around land ownership, it's around access to reproductive health services, it could be sanitary service facilities, but also think about what do men and boys also struggle with, and look at, you can look at it from the fragile context. Thinking about violent extremisms, how are men and boys marginalized, how are they excluded, how do they, how do they lack access to even justice in that situation? And then the solutions that we provide, can help to close those loops. So, that's just a suggestion, but, thinking about the differentials and then thinking about the solutions in to close that. Back to you, Carol.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'm glad you spoke to the work that Crowd2Map in Tanzania is doing in trying to eliminate FGM in the rural regions, and trying to actively help girls understand and be able to use technology to fight for themselves. So we can all agree that a lot of data that we collect, right, and identify gender inequalities is a lot of vector data. And it's not very common for us to be able to use raster data or add observation. And speaking of this, I think recently the Digital Earth Africa released the GISDay strategy, which basically looked at the various gaps that are in the industry. And I'd like Mubea to speak to us about whether there's space for Earth observation and probably remote sensing to be able to be used in probably identifying the issues and trying to solve the issues as well.
Thank you very much, Carol. One of them is, as much as we have the strategy, is also the background that in this group, way back in 2001 or 2002, a class of GIS only had one lady. And 5 years later, 2007, 2008, we had more numbers. So it was a more appealing engineering than a course like some of my students are here, Sophie and Jerry. So there's been an evolution that this high tech is not just for the men. I get a high five from the team, is that we are having more women involved. And also as part of this strategy is that some of them, we've worked with them in terms of mentorship, and I could talk about a personal experience with one of our former students where I started a program in GIS way back in 2010, 2011. This is Stella Mutai. She also got a scholarship from ITC to do her master's, which she finished. And at ASEMAD conference sometime last year, she was able to get an opportunity to have a consultancy to work with IFAD because she presented one of the best papers. So I'm talking about some people that actually helping us shape the strategy that you can actually at least some champions, and these people can actually even talk in this forum, or even instead of having this forum once a year, we can have it often, so that we continue with the dialogue. And also go back to my previous slide, that how can we reach those people in that Manyata. So coming from space to village, making the technology very easy to use. That's what the Africa has done. We've actually made it like analysis ready data. So the analysis which Carol and your colleagues used to do, like download data from the USGS surveys, sometimes your computer could crash. I think you had moments talking about maybe having at least 40 GB. Now everything is online, accessible. Even moving to the idea that we could have this sent over WhatsApp to a decision maker, which I've seen in our colleagues in Tanzania, especially one champion I know at the National Bureau of Statistics, that you sent a result, which is like an animation on a mobile phone, like a WhatsApp message. He was able to share this with the Office of the Prime Minister, and we could get dialogue anytime to present the results. Like this was a situation with the flooding in Lake Lunga, which affects women and most vulnerable people. And when does flooding occur? Maybe the times of the year, and how can you visualize this in a 3D, just in a WhatsApp message? You have a 5-minute or a 2-minute with President Uhuru Kenyatta. Can you convince him to invest in our strategy, convince in what we are doing? So I'm kind of moving from that, and that we are moving from this strategy of many pages to just one policy brief, which like even a paragraph, we'll be able to work in these 54 countries because we have this big vision, and we cannot do it without the team, which we have here, Women in GIS in Kenya, which is growing, the team in Uganda, and also our colleagues from South Africa who have joined. Together, we can have the Africa we want. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Kenneth. So Alkad, speaking of strategies, there's a lot of countries and organizations or institutes trying to come up with open data strategies. How do we ensure that these strategies actually prioritize gender visibility or prioritize generation of gendered data, like as opposed to just having the data is open and it's very accessible? So is there room for having these data also gendered, or having gender visibility within the data that we are collecting?
Well, I think I have two contributions to that. We've been talking about gender disaggregated data for a while.
Yeah.
And I think I go back to one of the slides that I think from the presentation from here, I saw a slide where it started by saying that majority of the people who work in data in general, and of course in GIS, are men. And I think Ken has made the same point. The strategies I would suggest are twofold. One, let's make sure there's proactive involvement and make sure that there's a lot more stories of women and girls collecting and using data, because that automatically ensures that gender is disaggregated, because of the fact that when women and girls are collecting data, they're not going to leave themselves behind, so to speak.
Yeah.
It's just a basic. And also in making sure that women and girls are there are a lot more stories of women and girls being a lot more visible in policy advocacy that is data driven. Because a lot of, I've been to meetings where I'm watching women groups and others doing advocacy and actually making very, very strong points, but not having data to back those points up. So what happens then is the policymakers tend to glaze over and say, we will look into it and make very good noises, but do very little in the end of it. If we have seen in our experience that when citizens have data, they actually force policymakers to change how they do things, and they actually force them to do something about stuff. So strategy number one would be proactive involvement, making sure that women and girls are collecting and using data for advocacy. The second thing is actually creating initiatives that are local, that are disaggregated, that are in different places, that actually surface data, and that making sure that that data is, I want to say, overlaid with existing data. So what I'm really saying here is making sure that there's a lot of women and girls and citizens within communities who are collecting data of all kinds, including geodata. I think I heard it's called, Karen told me that a phrase that I really like, which is, I think, locational intelligence or something like that.
Yeah.
I think if we can have a lot more data being surfaced in a disaggregated fashion in villages, you will find that it becomes gender disaggregated by sort of naturally. A simple example is when we were collecting data in one of the villages in Lenah location, we found that just by collecting data on breadwinners within the household, it becomes very possible for you to see which breadwinners are men, which ones are women, and what the security situation in those homes are. And we were making observations like women-led households had more security incidences than male-led households, which then said to the community policing community what they needed to do about that particular problem. So what I'm really saying is that if we can figure out how to surface more data by women and girls that is guided by your expertise as the people who are the experts in this space. I've been stalking a lot of you on LinkedIn and just seeing the kind of expertise that all of you have. I think it will change the complexion of the data. It will change how not only is it gender disaggregated, but also age disaggregated, because that's another gap that currently exists, that there's not enough information about age disaggregation. How many young people are doing farming, for example, is data that does not exist, that Ministry of Agriculture needs, so that they can then say whether technology can actually have faster or slower uptake, because we already know that old fogies like me struggle a little more with technology than so that's one thing that you want to sort of figure out how you can surface a lot more data from the ground. I think there's a real opportunity there because of the fact that if there are more examples, then what happens collection by women and girls. If that happens, then it becomes a norm. And if it becomes a norm, then we are all going to be happy.
Amazing. So Al, probably just continuing this conversation. So with that in mind, and with knowing that we are working towards achievement of SDG on gender equality. So usually to test for or to check for the achievement of that, there's a lot of data collection and monitoring of various indicators. So some of the indicators for SDG 5 are probably economic equity, access to education, sexual and reproductive health, leadership, all these factors. So with the information that you've given us, that including women and girls in the data collection process and availing this information, probably in your words or from your experience, how far do you think we are from achieving SDG 5? That's a very broad question.
It's a huge question.
Yes.
I think there are stories that I have seen, but I don't think we are even nearly there. I don't even think we've scratched the surface yet. I think there are some stories, and a lot of them are CSO driven. They're driven by organizations where you find that, a small organization or a large organization had a small pilot project somewhere, and they have done some data collection here, and they have captured some level of inequality in a small space. The problem is that it's not scaling, it's not growing enough, and part of that problem is because of how is, in my view, the models that we have been using. The models that it is one organization doing the project and then finishing the project and then moving on to the next one without necessarily pushing forward with how it is scaled up into larger and larger communities and so on. And also, I think the biggest challenge there is that we are not using citizens enough. We're using experts, so it's experts doing the expertise, but not using citizens enough. And yet are many things that citizens can do that don't need a university degree. They don't need expertise in some of the GIS data tools that you guys already use. And they don't even need to have a Garmin or a tool like that for purposes of collecting that data. So what I would love to see is for us to change that is to decentralize that knowledge. I think I would take a moment here to just call upon women in GIS in Kenya as a specific person that I'm speaking to now. I would call upon you to actually spend a lot more times in communities, getting women and girls to have the expertise, to have the knowledge of how they can begin to collect geo location, geo data of any kind, or what you call locational intelligence, because of the fact that the more they're doing it, the more they're doing it in their spaces, the more they're doing it for their uses, the more open that data is, the more it can be aggregated to actually give a much wider picture. So what I'd love to see is I'd love to see activities in Kenya, in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in other places, of literally women and girls just doing whatever it is that is relevant in their community to collect that data.
Thank you so much. So I think I'm going to respond to that, and then also introduce the final question, because we need to wind up on how the Digital Earth Africa and GBSDD are using data to try what your organizations are trying to do to support achievement of SDG 5. And before I let you guys go with that, I'm going to speak to what Women in GIS is specifically doing in this line. So we founded Women in GIS at around 2017 or 2018. And what we've been trying to do is work from where we are and trying to expand our scope. So in this regard, a lot of what we try to do is offer mentorship and also capacity building or training. So what we do is we work directly with universities to try and train people who are not traditionally in GIS on data collection and also understanding gender issues. And I think this year and last year, we've been able to achieve quite a lot of that. We've been able to have people who are not used to probably talking about issues to do with sexual and reproductive health now actually coming out and using data to have these conversations. So that's the little that we are trying to do. Of course, trying to expand on this and trying to include more people in this conversation is our goal for 2021. I will stop right there and probably ask Kenneth to go first, and then we'll hear from Karen on what your organizations are specifically or are targeting to do towards achievement of SDG 5.
Thank you very much, Caroline, and also thank you very much for letting me go before Karen, because Karen has all the answers. First and foremost, since we have the strategy which we are working on, is to see how we can work more on the education side in terms of capacity development. And since we are working in the African continent, it's quite a big area to cover. So working closely with the hubs, local organizations, trying to create more partnerships. I'm also looking at Women in GIS being very strategic, as well as the other groups in other countries, also creating an opportunity for industry like startups, like they can use the platform for innovation, creating local level solutions, and also moving beyond data collection, because we also have another strategy on data validation, which requires all gender to be. And also, if you've gone to one village, you realize if you're validating information, our grandmothers tend to have more information. I don't know if they had more memory than our grandpas. So I'm trying to kind of come from somewhere I resonate with, and seeing that we involve everyone, even in the data validation, also an opportunity for mentorship, like we're working closely with the GEO group. This is a group of Earth observation, looking at the various dimensions, like we have the AfriGeos, looking also at more opportunities, like having sessions where, like, we have the American Geophysical Union, we have a session on the gender and social inclusion in climate analysis, which is very key to have more people involved in the decision making, where when you talk about climate, you're covering a diversity of issues, from food security, also having more champion, like more women involved, like helping us in the development of the use cases that we are working on, from food security, water. We have this continental product on water observations from space. We are working with women, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Ghana, Kenya, Tanzania. Even I'm working with someone in Zanzibar. So we're trying to kind of look for champions and grow with them, and also very grateful for the partnership. We have the global partnership who have these very good networks in terms of data collaboratives, and also Open Institute who've done much work in the ground, where we call it Mashinani because of Wanjiko. I don't know how Wanjiko is called in South Africa. So I'm trying to look at how we can go to the local level. We are at this continent level, but it's only possible through everyone in this call. So everyone in this call is very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ken. So finally, Karen. You're muted.
Sorry. Now, give two examples. One is something we've been working on with the Women in GIS, in just trying to reflect on what's the business process for a government institution if they want to strengthen the gender data, or to establish actually a unit around gender data. And when you look at the business process, there are a couple of steps that they need to think about, even beyond Kenya, even at the subnational level. But what do governments need to think of when they need to establish this unit? So thinking about the policies in place, the gaps and the priorities, I think that's fundamental. And just seeing, does the law currently allow data sharing, data privacy, data security, data agreements or data sharing agreements? So looking at the policy space and knowing where is the gap, I think is the first step. The second one is also understanding the ecosystem. Who are the people? What's the data? What partnerships does the government need to establish? So going beyond just thinking about gender data as data that is only from government, but looking at data from citizens, from CSOs, from other government agencies, and then having that complete ecosystem or an inventory to know the types of data and the quality, and also the completeness and the frequency. I think the other step also in that business process is also the infrastructure that is needed. You're talking about the technology, but you're also talking about the people. And in terms of where does the data sit? Who develops? Who maintains? Who is the team that analyzes the data? Do data scientists exist? If not, who can they partner with to have people actually crunching the numbers? And then also, thinking about funding. It's hard to establish a unit without financial resources. So how much does it cost to run a unit or a department within the ministry on gender? Does this money come from government? Do we need to go to donors to find more resources for this? And then thinking about sustainability also, how does this then align to strategic objectives, and also managing the infrastructure that have been established? So in terms of licenses, are they open? Are they lasting for a very long time? And how do you ensure that the unit lives even beyond the time that the people in the institution are working? So those are considerations which you find most I could be wrong in some governments, but you find like most governments have not thought about this in that business process way, but they have it in their strategic plans that they want to do more on gender data. They want to establish systems. They want to think about using data. But I think primarily those business process ideas have not been sort of institutionalized within government. So that's one, and that's more focused on gender data. But just for the benefit of, the global partnership, works to champion data even beyond, Goal 5. So thinking about all the other SDGs and all the other commitments that the world has made. And so, the document that really guides us as a global partnership when it comes to SDG is a report that we published in 2015. We call it A World That Counts. And in that report, it was really, thinking about how do you champion the data revolution, and how do you make sure that you're having a common voice, bringing together governments and non-state actors. And in that report, we had a set of 5 recommendations on what the revolution needs to look like. And I think this is something we're thinking about, and also looking at, have we achieved these recommendations, or are we getting there? And there are a couple of things that I'd like to share, which really touch on the conversation we're having now. So the first recommendation we made was around standards and principles around data, whether it comes to legal issues, technical, privacy, but also geospatial and statistical standards. And you see, you find between 2014 and now, there've been, fair amount of progress in, having standards and guidelines and principles around those data consensus. And, geospatial, they exist, but, I think what is missing is really now what Ken says, from space to village, really seeing how the principles touch on communities and touch on local citizens. The second recommendation, and I know, is around technology for common good, and how do we use technology then, which I think the work that we're talking about here is around technology. How do we document, how do we say enough, and how do we show the world that we're actually using technology for common good, and including those people who are already left out in the technology. The third one is on capacity development, and I think this is what we are doing in this call, actually. Building capacity, but also sharing the skills that we have with like-minded people, individuals, and networks, but also seeing then how do we bring on board the unlike-minded, or the people who don't have the skills, to strengthen the skills. The fourth is on coordination and mobilization, and the last one, which I'd want to touch on, and this is a recommendation that we're really struggling with, is on data use. Use of the data. We've convened conversations about people producing the data, bringing national statistical officers together to think about data. We've not done much on data use, demonstrating actually what's the value of all this data that we've collected across the world in so many years. Who's using the data? Is the data meaningful? How can we correct the data? How do we, show the use to policymakers for them to change the data if the data is not accurate, but also make decisions around that, what we're finding in the data use. So, and I think that, is a quick win when you think about SDG 5, when you think about geospatial data, when you think about, the skills that women in GIS, Kenya and Uganda have, and then how do we use that to actually reach, the communities and the village level. So there's a lot of alignment, in short, but yeah, there's stuff also to reflect on. Back to you, Carol.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so glad to hear that organizations are actually intentionally working towards achievement of SDG 5, probably through data or through other activities that are completely aligned with the organizational goals. I'm wishing we scheduled this conversation to take longer, but unfortunately we've even gone past the scheduled time for this. Thank you very much, Kenneth. Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you very much, Alkad. I hope we can have another time to continue this. We'll probably schedule something else towards the end of the year to continue this conversation. I look forward to having a lot more engagement with the organizations. And thank you so much for the support. I don't know if the participants had any questions for the panelists. Njeri, Nombu?
I currently don't see any questions. But definitely, Caroline, thank you very much for the conversation. I feel like this is a conversation that can continue, offline as well, considering that this should not be a platform that just ends here, and these kind of strategies, initiatives, innovations, as well as thought ideas can continually be enhanced, improved offline as well. If you allow me, I think I don't see any questions at the moment, but I can wind up, and if any other questions can come about, maybe we'll have them at the end. So I'd like and thank you all for those who have managed to stick with us through up to the end. We are really grateful for joining us on this session. It was an amazing and very informative session. I'd like to very much appreciate the organizers, Women in GIS Kenya, Women in GIS Uganda, And key organizations that I'd like to thank is Open Institute. We'd like to thank Here Technologies, Digital Art Africa, Zindi, as well as Global Partnership for Sustainable Development for all contributing to this session. And also definitely the speakers from Kennedy to Lenah, Naomi, Celina, and our presenters, Alkags, Karen, and Kenneth Mubea. We are very grateful for having all of you here. I'd like to quickly give a shout out to the Women in GIS Kenya team. Thank you all for joining us. This is the team behind what you see and the works we've been doing. Yariwo, Caroline, myself, Njeri, Nomiselo, our strategic advisor, Dr. Samasharia, Angela, Ivy, Ruth, and Esther. We are very grateful for all the effort throughout this work. We're also grateful to the Kenya Women in GIS Uganda team, who have also been instrumental in this particular session. Mary, Mukose, Lillian, Daphne, Ellen, Kemi, and Ruyondo, thank you very much for your time. So how can you contribute beyond this? You can spread the word of the work we do, the work our partner organizations are doing, and our other sister friends are also doing. The various organizations, you can follow them on their Twitter accounts, spread their work. You can become a member of our organizations, and you can also reach out to us to host another event or become a volunteer. And with that, I'd like to end the session by pointing out that for the 3 key winners who won our challenge for today, kindly private message me your emails. So Tom, Joy, and our #1 winner, Angela Muturi, DM me your emails. What we have for you, courtesy of Esri, is advanced licenses for individuals. So I know normally in school you use Esri licenses, and when you leave school it's expensive. So we have licenses for you for the ArcGIS platform, which you can use. So congratulations. I'd like to end by saying you can contact us. Our Women in GIS contact information is there for both the Kenyan and the Ugandan office. And yeah, wishing you all a very great GIS day, leaving you with Jack Dangermon's quote: the application of GIS is limited only by the imagination of those who use it. So go out there and have an awesome GIS day. And thank you very much for joining us. Have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you so much, all our panelists and presenters.